You mentioned not necessarily being a hockey guy previously, but you have a basketball team, and every basketball team needs a hockey team, so you can have parades back-to-back summers, obviously. So I was just curious, when you first watched hockey for the first time, was it when you were interested in purchasing a team?
Yeah. Well, it was a couple of things. I had a real desire to build a state-of-the-art venue. And in order to do that, and particularly in a small market, you need to fill the place up. And 41 nights plus playoffs for one team leaves a big vacuum. So it makes it so much easier if you're literally in the winter months rotating every other night with hockey and basketball. I loved hockey growing up. I went to a high school that had a hockey team, so I was familiar with it. But I played basketball, and if you played a different winter sport, you didn't play hockey. I loved it. I just thought that it was such an artful game. I also loved the culture. This fantasy that I had of kids growing up on frozen ponds and their mothers trying to get them to come in at dark, and because that was very much my childhood. We'd play outside until they dragged us in by our hair. So.
And when did the Nordiques come on your radar? Was it because the On Ice product was a young, promising team, or did you already have some familiarity with the front office?
It was purely opportunistic. There was this wonderful, colorful gentleman named Marcel Abou, who lived in Quebec City and was a known, I think his law firm was Abou Chabot Avocat or something like that. It was he was a very interesting, colorful, jolly, passionate guy. And he was having trouble making the franchise work in Quebec. It was a small market. They had enormous financial demands in that town for more basic services like schools and hospitals. And so a new sports arena was not at the top of the list. And without a sports arena, a new one, it just didn't work out. They would lose money every year, and that put them at a competitive disadvantage. I was interested in building a new arena, and I was interested in acquiring a hockey team. And I didn't think we were going to get the Nordiques. My God, what a find to get a team that's right on the cusp of going deep into the playoffs with that kind of roster and that kind of management. But I felt that it would help Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the National Hockey League, and the organization to have a suitor for the Nordiques, because sometimes the presence of a suitor will cause the local government and the state government and the province to step forward and say, this is a national treasure, we have to keep it here. So I figured being a bridesmaid was a good thing to do relative to my interest in getting a hockey team. If I helped them solve a problem, that it would inure to a future dream. But did I think it was going to happen? No, I knew I was being used. And as a matter of fact, my board of directors said, what are you using our brand as a bridesmaid for? Because the chances are you're not going to get it. And when you don't get it, you will have, put it out there. And I said, no, I think it's quite the opposite. We're going to build all this goodwill in the hockey community at minimum to help them solve a problem. And what if they can't solve it? It might fall in our lap. So I would meet with Marcel once a week. He would fly down. I would take him, he loved Chinese food, so I'd take him to get his Chinese food. We had this wonderful little Chinese dump in Bethesda. And I would take my son, who was in a high chair then. Now he's a big, strong hockey player, but he was in a high chair then. And Daniel would throw food at him, and he would drink Mai Tais, and we would laugh. But in every single meeting that I had with him, he would stop and he would say, do you understand how good this team is and how close they are? And he would tick through the players as though he was talking about his children. And I could see the passion, and I could see this dream that he had. We're on the cusp of winning it all. And so, but one day he came down. It was literally after a year of this. And he came down, he sat down, he literally had tears in his eyes and said, the last thing I want to do is sell. And then he proceeded to go into his monologue again about, Sakic and Forsberg and Ozelich and it was so compelling, but sports is really childlike, fortunately. It's yes, it's a big business, and yes, it's about ratings and media partners and blah blah blah, but ultimately it's kids doing what they love. And the idea that we had a shot of launching with a competitor franchise, and little did we know, the rest is history. We acquired the team and the Hershey Bears. We got 2 teams, and the rest kind of fell into place.
And I want to bring Pierre into the fold too, because the reason we're all here this weekend is the induction to Hockey Hall of Fame. What were some of the first conversations you had with him like?
Pierre. So I knew the team had a general manager, and I knew that the general manager that they had crossed over, so to speak. He'd been a notorious, successful, visionary sports agent. And, it's almost the arsonist as fire chief, right? He was there he was, and the players were talking about it last night on what it was like to see Pierre go from worrying about their welfare and every aspect of their life as an agent to being a general manager and all of a sudden being on the other side of the negotiating table. But what Pierre brought with him was an extraordinary store of knowledge about individual players, but on what made them tick, how to create an environment, because he had to do that as an agent. He had a stable of superstars, and for him it was about, there's a chemistry that's involved in servicing all your clients, because I'm sure one of the things that I would get from clients is he made everybody feel that they were the most important thing in his life. That's Pierre. That's the miracle, that when he's talking to you, he's talking to you. And when he's talking about what's important to you, he goes to things that go beyond. In other words, it's not just, you've seen the cliche sports movies, where the agent goes and sits on the couch of a promising young athlete and buys the parents cars and stuff like that. That's a mercenary relationship. Pierre actually had an intimate relationship with these families and every aspect of the family, including their illnesses, their vulnerabilities. He cared. I mean, family to him was everything. So here this guy walks in, and by the way, there was no certainty that he would want to come to Colorado, nor was there an expectation that it was part of the transaction. It was, hey, he's available if that's what you want. And I can tell you that there were people in the league that said, oh, you're going to be better off if you just take a general manager from within the league that has more experience, and that it was a good makeshift moment for the Nordiques, but you have options. But then I met him, and I just fell in love with him right away because he's so warm. You could see him just emanating not only incredible capability. I mean, that was obvious when it came, and look, one of the things that I think is really kind of ridiculous is when you get cast all of a sudden as an owner of a team, that somehow you start pretending like you know what you're doing. And, unless you have been doing it for, Pierre was a great sort of, had a real religiosity to him about, it's 10,000 hours. Until you've done it for 10,000 hours, you don't know what you're doing. And so I was very comfortable not knowing, but I realized that I was with this guy who understood what it was like to represent players and their families and their aspirations and their dreams, and at the same time, how to put it all together like a magnificent recipe and create an enduring family that had one goal, and that was to look after each other first and foremost and to win a championship. He didn't come to like, we can be competitive and we're building with youth and that. No, he came saying, we're at the gates and we're going to win. And literally those were his first words. I said, what do you think? He said, we're going to win. And you know, the trade that cemented that outcome was the middle of the season. We were off to a decent start. You know, I mean, the reporter said, well, it was a sort of a medium start, but it was a solid start. And then all of a sudden, you know, the mess up in Montreal and the opportunity with Patrick. And he called me, and I was on the road when it happened, and I was going, you know, I was in the middle of a very busy time. And he said to me, look, we got a chance to get Patty. And I represented him, and he's going. He's not staying there. And we have one shot at this, and we got to decide right now. And I said, well, give me your analysis. He said, we're going to win. That was it. That was the length. That was the extent of the conversation. We get him, we got our piece. We're going to win. And by the way, even that was controversial. People would call me and say, oh, you know, he's not a kid anymore, and, you know, his best days are behind him, and, you know, all the undermining garbage that goes on in the business. And Pierre was certain we're going to win. And guess what?
This might be the answer to a couple questions, but I want to know how you had trust in something as matter of fact as we're going to win. What did Pierre do to earn that kind of trust in you and his ability to do his job?
You know, look at what we went through, right? So we get the team. I don't remember the exact date, but I do remember we were going into the summer. So between whatever that date was, which I sort of remember to be June, but you'll go back and tell me when it was, we had to relocate a professional sports franchise and all their families and all their equipment and all their, you know, everything that goes with it in a record amount of time. And so that it's the moment of truth, right? You're going to learn in the line of fire how that happens. Well, Pierre and Charlotte made that happen. That they were able to organize an entire group of people to say, yes, you have all this stuff you have to take care of. Oh, and by the way, we're relocating a professional hockey team, and we have to do it and be ready to play like we didn't miss a trick. And go through all the, gee, this wasn't the house that I thought we were going to get, and oh my God, I thought this would be closer, and oh my God, I thought this would be better. Oh my, where are my kids going to go to school, and can you write recommendations for my kids, and how do I go about? I mean, think of the family pressure that accompanies a move like that, and that was the first priority for Pierre, to get it done, but to also make the families feel like, God, we are so blessed to be in this beautiful state and to be together, and the future is ours. And that's what he did. So there was no question. You see a person like that day in and day out, and you see how he interacts with staff. And, you know, Pierre had a great idea about life, which was you can judge the character of a man by how he treats people that can do nothing for them. In other words, the person parking the car, the person that's working in one of the vending stations, the ushers, the way he related to folks that a lot of people just go by and it's like, but he said hi to everybody. He knew everybody. He became Uncle Pete, Father Pete, Rabbi Pete, His Excellency Pete from day one. And then it's like, are you kidding? You got the best in the world. And we became best friends. He became godfather of my kids. And so all that happened is every day I was around him, the relationship got stronger and friendlier and, of course, funnier. Because he was a practical jokester. He was a practical joker.
I actually love it because one of his family members, there were two things that she said to me that stood out, and one of them was the mischief, and she actually had an example of a prank that he'd played on her, and the other was describing him as Mr. Fix-It. And I wanted to know if you ever got a front row seat to watching him work. Like, were you ever there when he was making some of those phone calls to get deals across the finish line?
I was there frequently because it was let's put it to this way, Broadway's got nothing on Uncle Pete. The theater that he would create and the drama that he could create with a smile on his face to get what he needed accomplished, always in the name of the organization, always in the name of the family, was a pay-per-view event. You know, he could have charged when he was having to undergo a tough interview with a journalist, whether he was dealing with another general manager, whether he was taking the pants down of another general manager in a negotiation. He was one of the most clever, cunning, strategic, but what was so special about him is he did it with a smile on his face, and it was entertaining. And you know, for me, it was like I wasn't working. I would come and just watch it and take it in. It's like, and you learn life lessons from people like that. So I looked up to Pierre.
And I don't want to abandon the mischief trope either. Did he ever play a prank on you? I'm sure he played a few.
Well, we were constantly trying to out-prank each other because I have a love of mischief also. So we would, we got into a couple of violent wars with each other over comedy. We had a neighbor that, will go unnamed here, but, you know, he was known for having maybe the worst hairpiece that anybody had ever seen. So Pierre came up with an affectionate nickname for him as a golfer. It was a technical observation. Called him Divot. And so that was something that we had a lot of fun with and had fun with the person. And one day Pierre came back from one of his trips, and lo and behold, I think he'd been in the Far East. I don't know where it was. He came across a Divot doll, a troll likeness of this character. And of course, this Divot doll was passed back and forth between the two of us. We were neighbors and we lived across the cul-de-sac. And it would, the Divot doll would be, wake up on the grill of your car, would wake up in your dishwasher. And so there was, and Pierre was incredibly ingenious about the way he would do it. So this was serious business, right? So I went ahead and was able to trace the manufacturer of the Divot doll and ordered, I think, 1,000 of them. And so he went away with Coco on one of their romantic trips. They like to get away, and husband and wife, and they were beautiful and so on, but they were dumb enough to leave the door, our ability to get in and out of the house. And I placed 1,000 Divot dolls throughout his house, which I understood subsequent owners, after Pierre and Coco had left, were still finding these Divot dolls. I mean, because when it came down to it, we didn't write down on a list where we put them. I just went ahead, and I did it with my kids, who it was their godfather, Uncle Pete, and they were just giggling with delight as Divot dolls were being placed in all kinds of obscure locations around the house. So, I mean, that is kind of garden variety of the stuff that we did to cause trouble.
And I can begin writing this down, but I wanted to reflect on the fact that he's being inducted to the Hall of Fame as a builder. And he obviously built good hockey teams. They have the hardware to prove it. But I wanted to know a little bit more about what he built beyond hockey.
Yes.
The legacy that he's left. If you could tell me a little bit about that.
That is, what he built was culture. He built a culture for an organization. First of all, he built this feeling of responsibility that the players had towards the community. They really did care about what they did on those days when people that had less, and he would have them descend with him as sort of the orchestrator on hospitals, in schools, in situations often where people had less. And he would make the players understand that it's as much their job to embrace the community and embrace people that have less as it is to perform on the ice and perform in the locker room. And so he built that perspective. He also, when it came to sponsors, when it came to top season ticket holders, anybody that had a vested interest with the franchise, he would go out of his way and be the front person for the organization in a way that every time he showed up, he elevated the Colorado Avalanche and the community. And the next thing you know, you're integrated. And the next thing you know, the kids, the players, are involved with all the kids. And when they said that he increased the size of the hockey audience in Colorado by a factor of 4, that's not a small thing. That was all his passion, that not only are we going to win, because that buys you a lot of fans, but we're also going to be a major part of the community, and that people will they'll hear the Colorado Avalanche and they'll feel nothing but love. And that's what he wanted, and that's what he achieved.
And this will be the very last one, but in lieu of him getting to be here in person himself, it seems like he's still here in a lot of different ways in how he touched all of the people who've shown up to support him. And I wanted to know on a personal level how he's still here with you.
Okay, let's. This is a documentary. This isn't, a supernatural thriller. He's here. He's up there, and as the master marionette right now. Why? Because he wants to make sure it's funny. That, he doesn't want to be seen as, I often make a joke, he doesn't want to be seen as Betsy Ross in a dramatic way saving Denver. No. He's Dave Chappelle. he's the funniest person on earth, also the warmest. I can tell you the number of journalists that have come to me and said how much they miss him and how much they love him. And these were journalists that you were, trying to get the story. It's a give and take, but he was beloved, and so he leaves that love behind. It's embodied in his family. He's got a terrific family with Eric and Marty, and then the first lady of hockey, which is Coco, right, and Charlotte, right. Charlotte is I would. Basically, she was a lot more than Pierre's vice president. She was head of the whole cabinet. She was the Supreme Court. Charlotte was everything. And so, he built this extraordinary team. So he hasn't left. He's still here. He's just, getting to enjoy it from a beautiful pasture.
He's still finding Divot dolls to this day.
And I've been trying to figure out how to get him to heaven.
Yeah.
And we'll crack it.
Oh, absolutely.
We will have covered.
We might invite supernatural forces for that one.
Jeff Bezos says he is going to open up an Amazon franchise in heaven, so that we'll have an entire Divot warehouse.
Prime.
Yeah.
Excellent.